back in the day when it was our grandparents and they stayed at a job for 30 years, it's like, well, they had a pension and they had all these other benefits that don't exist as much now, right? And so what I see in Gen Z is more of I'm going to make my own life in some ways. And in a lot of ways, I admire that. Move. Like if it's not feeling good, do something different.
Well, friends, welcome to this week's episode of The Boundless Show. This is Lisa Anderson here with you, as I often like to do, and we are now square into December, which is very exciting. Okay, here we are for our roundtable, and it is funny that if we're talking about, someone who has been married before, and we're talking about boundaries, now we're going to talk about restlessness and just feeling restless in life. And I think this is one we often put this, or we often discuss this when we talk in terms of like job and career, which is, I think, where we'll land a lot here in this conversation. But I think a lot of it just plays into, we were even talking before we started taping about how everything has to be quick now. And even, we want stuff delivered to us and we want to experience things or ingest things quickly, whether media or whatnot. So I think this is going to be a fun conversation. We have got our dear friends, Jenny, Dave, and Bree here. Hey, y'all.
Hello.
Good to have you here. Sorry that you're apparently so restless that we thought of you first for this roundtable. So,
we must have.
I don't know. We were like, oh yeah,
bullseye, really, honestly.
Yeah, we better bring in Jenny and Dave for that because they're hot messes. Okay,
but not Bree.
Not Bree. Bree's here
because she's
she
an expert.
Yeah, she's an expert with all her wisdom.
So,
yeah. Okay, so let's kick it off by saying, when you think of the term restless, as I just said it, where do you go first? Like, what does that mean to you? How do you internalize that? How do you apply it to your own life? And you can give an example if you want, or just talk generally. So, Bree, why don't you kick us off since you're not restless? Apparently.
Oh, yeah. Never felt that way in my life.
Yeah.
Sarcasm flag for
yeah.
those of you that need it. Anyways, about restlessness, I would label it as almost being discontent, or I think for me personally, it feels a lot like I'm not being productive right now, or like I just feel antsy, like I should be doing something else, or what I'm doing is not good enough, something along those lines. But it's really just this like irking feeling of like, I've got to do something else. It's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah. Dave, how about you?
Yeah, that's a great description. I was going to say discontent as well. I think a lot of times it has a lot to do with a sense of what the author Hebrew says, dead works, where you are looking to do something to fulfill you in a way when you really should be experiencing rest. And so there's a deadness to your work that is not life-giving. So that's how I would say it. Yeah,
that's very good. Jenny, anything to add?
Yeah, the first thing I was thinking was a lack of contentment. But, as they were talking, I feel like there's a part of that that's somewhat unfair. I think that's a very American way of saying like, oh, if you're restless, it automatically means you're not content. And it's equated negatively. But I think in some ways I was even thinking about my youngest, and she's just turned 9. And she was talking about something with school. And she just said, I'm just kind of bored at school. Like, I don't feel like she doesn't say don't feel like I'm getting challenged enough, but that was the heart of what she was saying. And that made me think like sometimes it is a boredom, which isn't necessarily bad. Like we're bad at being bored in America. That's true. And I think that that's part of the problem is we link boredom with there must be something else out there or I need to be doing something else. But it can be just this feeling in your spirit of either I'm bored or, of course, the malcontent. But the challenge would be that it doesn't always have to be negative. Sometimes it can be a spurring for something different.
Yeah, that's good.
That's great.
Does anyone have any examples of where this has applied to you in your life at some point? Like, when did you sense just a sense of restlessness, and where did it bring you?
I mean, I felt it in my career. So before working at Boundless, I was a high school math teacher, and it was during COVID, so that also led me to make some.
Everyone was restless.
Yeah, everybody was restless. But I would definitely say that just like in general, in my spirit, I felt like, okay, something here just doesn't feel like it used to. It doesn't feel good or like it's fitting to where I'm supposed to be at the moment. And so it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, like you were saying. It was like an encouragement of, okay, maybe this season has concluded and maybe it's time for something else. And at that particular time in my life, I was pregnant with my first kid, and no, that's a lie. I was pregnant with my second kid. And I chose to be a stay-at-home mom for a while right after teaching, and that was kind of just this like, okay, maybe this is what's next. So it was like it did start with a feeling
and then
of
3 weeks later, you're like, maybe I shouldn't be a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah, that is the toughest job I've ever done.
The restlessness came back.
Those women, they have been blessed and highly favored, and I was not one of them. I mean, whatever. It was not for me.
Okay.
But what I was trying to say is that it did start with a feeling of discontentment of like, oh, okay, this doesn't feel great anymore. So let's wrestle with this and see, like, does that mean I'm just not happy at this school, or does that mean I actually need a career change or need to try something different?
That's good.
Yeah, for me, I have been restless most of my life because I have wanted largely to be exalted more than I have been. So for some reason or other, one of the major sins of my life or bad attitudes of my life is truly wanting to have more status than I currently enjoy. And so that is an absolute discontent, and that leads to a lot of restlessness, right? So you start to think, if I'm not being promoted, or I do not have the status that I wish I had, or I don't have it right now, then there must be something wrong. How do I fix that? And what do I need to change in order to have at least the potential to be at that place of the status and maybe the income that I wanted? Status tends to be a little bit bigger for me than income. So, but I would say in a real sense for me, that has been a real epiphany, where a lot of my restlessness is just driven by, in a sense, a covetousness or greed for status, position, exaltation. And this also includes Christian ministry, like the fruitfulness. So, and the status that can come by having, quote unquote, much fruit. So all of that has been a big, big struggle in my life.
I think for a lot of people, that idea of restlessness, it comes into a mindset of, where is the line between, I guess the question I ask myself is, where is the line between, am I reaching my full potential and am I just discontent?
Right.
And I think that's a question, as a therapist, I don't necessarily totally buy into some of the personality stuff as far as putting you in a box. But for me, I'm an Enneagram 3, so I'm very success driven, very what's the next thing, what's the next goal. And in some ways that's great. And in other ways it can feel like, okay, check that off, now this, or now this is coming. And what I've had to ask myself is that restlessness is there something that God is calling me to, that perhaps I'm allowing myself to be distracted by other things that are, quote, good? Or is it truly a lack of gratitude, a lack of contentedness? There's a lot of different options, but that's kind of how I ask myself that question. Is it a potential problem, like a full potential in me, or is it a, like you were saying, like a coveted issue or a jealousy issue?
Well, it's interesting because, Bree, you kind of started by bringing this up, and then Dave and Jenny jumped on it. This idea of like, either way, you're going to reach a point of tension and you're going to have to wrestle with it and figure out, like, where is this coming from? Because I am certain, because Scripture says so, that restlessness can be prompted by Satan.
Right.
He can keep, his whole job is to keep us discontent or keep us busy or keep us frustrated or keep us envious. So there's going to be that. But then sometimes it also can be a sense of, okay, this is God moving. This is God. And maybe that's in addition to circumstances, or there might be, some words that you get from a great mentory type person. So how do you discern the difference? Like, for example, when have you seen a point in your life where you just really knew, like, I think this is God saying there's going to be a move here? And it could be a move, it could be a job move, it could be a relationship that I'll just share an example. had a guy I was dating propose to me. And first of all, we hadn't even been dating that long, which how amazing am I that he just thought like, I can lock this one in. No, I'm just teasing.
A plus
But
equals
I
C.
mean, that's a whole other show, you guys. No, just kidding. But I just remember feeling the Spirit. Like there were probably only a couple times in my life where I actually felt like had the Spirit said something audibly, I would have heard it at that point. And this guy was on a knee. And I was kind of hearing him with one ear. And I just felt like this is a hard pass. And you're going to say no. Now, I thought we were going to continue dating because I thought, let's just give this time. But I was like, there is no way you're saying yes to this. I just felt the Spirit tell me. So I said no. And by saying no, I really just said like, let's continue dating. And then within 3 weeks, he had dumped me, left our church, moved to another state, and started basically just slamming me about everything about me and my personality and my character. So that was God's word to me in retrospect, that was his definite prompting. But what are some other examples about where it's just like, yeah, it's a no-go?
I think there's a lot of tension in the church in general about God's voice, right? Or people, the way I will say it, so I'll take ownership of it, is people blaming things on God that he never said. And I think the thing with that is that people aren't willing to say that they got it wrong, which is okay. I'm not talking about prophecy necessarily. I'm just talking about, hey, we really feel like the Lord's moving us in this direction. And sometimes you get it wrong. And that's okay to just be humble enough to be like, man, I really got that wrong.
Right.
But other times there really is that peace.
Yeah.
And I think, different denominations think differently on this, but I think there are those very few times where I can sit back and say audibly, it was short and quick, something from the Lord that it's like, yes, if he was here in person, it would have been just as loud.
Yeah.
And other times it really is that peace, that knowing.
Yeah.
And then, in my opinion, I think it is confirmed by people around you in that very close circle of when you go to people and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And people that you trust who have been trustworthy in the past say, yeah, that makes sense. I think I wouldn't have maybe thought of that, or maybe they have.
Yeah.
But they said, given everything you said, I think that's a good shift.
Well, and it's funny because it's like what you're saying when these people are saying these things is it's implied that if you have made the right choice and you're doing the right thing, that means that you will be CEO or you will be a YouTube influencer. It's going to produce something that's like this is Dave. This is what Dave was just saying. So, but that idea of like, you can make a number of right choices.
Right.
And it's, first of all, there are a number of right choices in many different situations. It's not like you have to pick one or you are, you're kicked off the show or whatever. You're eliminated.
Or God's
TV.
favor is very
linear
or narrow.
So I think that's an interesting distinction in that, you could be making right choices, but it doesn't mean that the heavens are going to open and all of a sudden you're just, firing on all cylinders. So,
and that's most biblical stories, unfortunately. So,
Yeah. Other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say when it comes to, the spirit versus the flesh, right? It says that they are in tension so that you do not get what you want. And I think actually when God brings something to mind, which is a good, loving thing to do, but hard, it often will feel like something you don't want to do. And that is a part of the discipleship process, right? But it's really, you shouldn't feel bad about it because it's just you have the flesh and you have the spirit, and they are at war with each other. That's Galatians 5. And so not that necessarily it's a rule to say that God is always saying the thing that you don't want to do. That's not always true, of course. But we should also be very skeptical often of that associating God's will fully with our desires. And even if God does give you a desire, he's probably going to ask you to sacrifice it like Abraham did Isaac. And so that's an important
or Jonah,
part of the
another
reality.
great example.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that's I've seen in my life is that restlessness is never solved by a change in circumstance. It's only been solved in my life by character. a development of character in me. And restlessness is never, I am restless because of a lack of character, even though I never would want to admit that to myself. But it really is a lack of character by which, now that God has worked on my character, I actually experience a lot of peace and contentment in my life compared to where I was 10, 20 years ago. So, but again, it's doesn't flow from now I am getting what I want. It's really flowing from who the person God's made me to be.
I don't have a specific example that I can offer you, but kind of to Jenny's point, what I was thinking about was how in a place, like when you are in a place of restlessness, some things that you can do are to seek out the counsel of those around you that love you, hopefully love Jesus and can direct you, and that you are open and willing to receive their wisdom, even if it disagrees with what you want. I've actually been doing a study in Proverbs recently, and there is a difference between knowledge and wisdom, but wisdom is taking the knowledge that we have and being able to apply that knowledge how we see fit. And I know that sounds like a weird thing, but like when the wisdom is actually coming from the Lord and you are just seeped in his wisdom, you will make a good decision based off of the knowledge that you've been given. And like you're making a decision with that knowledge. That's a roundabout way to say that find wise people in your life that can offer you good advice. And then 2, praying about it, maybe even fasting about it. I know that especially when I was pursuing this job here at Boundless, I was between a couple of options, and I just asked you and the other hiring team, I was like, hey, can I please have the weekend to pray about it? Because I genuinely don't know which to choose. And as I sat with it and I made a pro-con list, because that's just who I am, and I talked to my husband about it and I was praying about it, and I just was like, you know what, the thing that I feel most peace about and the position that makes the most sense for me and my family is Boundless. And it just like, it was sitting in it and not rushing. It's not making rush decisions. It's really just like having wisdom or asking the Spirit for discernment. I think that that's a big part of what I did was like, Lord, these are both good options. I know that if I have to choose between one of these, neither one of them is bad. Kind of like what you were saying, like either they are both good options and one might be a little bit better than the other. And in my opinion, a lot better because I love Boundless and I love what I chose. And the Lord really did direct those steps because these last 2 years that I've been with Boundless have been so incredible. And I've loved working with Lisa. So, Spirit really drove that one and I'm very grateful.
No, that's good. And it's funny though, Brie, because you said, sometimes we have to sit in something and wait and pray and everything. But I think also it just made me think sometimes we're too prone to sit to the sense of like digging in our heels. Like how many people rely on, what the oldsters used to call the liver quivers or the putting out fleeces or the I'm just going to sit here. Like I'm going to sit down and not move because I'm so afraid what a move might look like, whether, and again, I'm saying like whether it's a career thing or a relationship you're in or whatever. And there's an element, kind of the 2 things I was thinking of is it always surprises me how often people are asking the Lord for something, but they're not even doing the things that he's already asked them to do.
Right.
So it's like, you know what? If God's already asked you to do 3 things and you're asking him about something over here, he's like, you know what? How about do the things I already told you to do? And then we'll talk about these other things. Yeah. So I think that's one element of it. And then 2, it's like, stay in motion and be faithful where you are and be in motion and be learning and be doing all the things because that ultimately is going to be part of your story too. And I'm so into the straight line, like again, the relationship thing. I was really bummed that I had potentially, I didn't want to have a broken engagement or a bad but I'm still bummed that I had to say no to a proposal because now that's part of my story. And I just thought it was so lame. But I'm like, not all lines are straight. God uses lines that are curving around too. And sometimes they backtrack on each other. And that's okay too, as long as God is in it. So I think that's been encouraging to me in understanding how to take restlessness and do something with it, I think. So, well, in our last couple of minutes, any other thoughts that you have about how to help people who maybe are paralyzed in something or feeling, whether it's like Dave was saying, whether it's a character thing or a personality thing or just I'm just going to say it, maybe a spiritual immaturity thing of a fearfulness that's at play. And folks just are like, I don't know what to do with this restlessness. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it's from. What would be your advice to them?
I think that's great. One of the things, I guess I'll just preface by saying I'm a millennial, so people know that, and I say this with a lot of love. Every generation is marked with something, right? That other generations say about that generation, whatever it is, right? And one of the things that's really interesting, and I think I admire in a lot of ways about the Gen Z and the older Gen Alpha, is they're not willing to sit around when they're unhappy. Now, we have to temper that as Christians, right? So that's just a broad statement. But, back in the day when it was our grandparents and they stayed at a job for 30 years, it's like, well, they had a pension and they had all these other benefits that don't exist as much now, right? And so what I see in Gen Z is more of I'm going to make my own life in some ways. And in a lot of ways, I admire that because I think there's something to, like you were saying with motion. Move. Like if it's not feeling good, do something different. Move. And yet at the other end, I would challenge people to say it's also okay to take a second and pray, fast, get counsel, get wisdom before you just potentially impulsively do something. But I think in some ways an unacceptability of restlessness when it comes with complacency can be okay.
Yeah.
But it needs to be tempered a little bit.
Yeah. Interesting.
I would add that, this is one of my favorite things that I abide by, and it's just bring it into the light, because if it stays in the darkness, it's easier for it to just grab a hold of you. And so I have this idea in my mind that if you let restlessness just kind of sit inside of you and you don't talk about it, you don't process it with God or with trusted counsel, that's really when the devil can grab a hold of it. But if you bring it out into the light and you say hey, I need to talk to you, my friend, about this, or my therapist, or pray about it, journal about it, those are the times where it's like, okay, this restlessness can be a good thing. It can be something that God can use, and it doesn't have this yucky grip on me that I'm stuck here and I'm just going to sit in this restlessness, but rather it's like, okay, God can use this to move me.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, there's a couple stories that come to mind, but I would just actually say one of the things you can do too is ask God for more faith. There largely is a sense in restlessness of a fear, which is an unbelief a lot of times too, that God's going to do good in your life. And so the story I'm thinking of a bit is when the disciples are in the boat during the storm and Jesus is asleep, and they cry out to him, Lord, don't you care about this storm? And then he gets up and rebukes the storm and it calms. And then he calls them little faiths. I think most translations say, oh, you have little faith. But he actually calls them a name. He said, little faiths. and what's interesting, Dallas Willard, when he tells that story, he said this always puzzled him for a long time because they actually were doing what you would think would be the right thing to do. They called out to Jesus to do something about the storm, but yet he was, rebuked them for their little faith. And Dallas Willard just says basically what they had faith in Jesus, but they did not have the faith of Jesus. And that is a very interesting distinction about what the faith of Jesus largely is, in that that his whole will is completely submitted to the Father's will to do what the Father would have him to do. And that in knowledge of God's will, a scary storm, it would just is a thing for him he can rest in, because he knows that that his death is happening on a cross, not in a boat in the middle of the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I thought that's a really great thing. You can just ask for more faith. Usually when you ask for that, you're going to have to buckle up a bit.
Right.
But it is actually a thing that you might just say, maybe you have some faith in Jesus, but you need to learn the faith of Jesus. And that's a pretty powerful thing.
That's interesting because it makes me think, too, you're kind of hearkening back to what you referenced, Dave, with the Abraham and Isaac, in that Abraham technically knew elements of how that story was going to end. So that's why he had to reconcile, like, what I'm being asked to do now with what I know the promise is. Somehow this has to all work out. And even in the storm, Jesus had told them that they were going to go do something. So if they had thought of the full story and what Jesus had and the full counsel of what he was promising, they would have been able to say, well, somehow we're going to cross over here because we have another mission on tap. But what was right in front of them was so scary. And so I think that's a good lesson to all of us to realize that, where you might be somewhere in the story and it might be a really bad spot, but what are some of the promises that you've been given that speak to you a little bit further down the line, which obviously ultimately for us as believers, it's all good. It ends well. So we just don't know the details. But you guys, such a great conversation, really thoughtful. Thank you so much for weighing in on this. And as we report on restlessness in our own lives, maybe we can encourage one another. This is why we need people in our lives to do that. To that point, I want to say as we close here that we often say this here at Boundless when we have the opportunity, we have a team of trained professional counselors here who would love to speak with you on the phone for a complimentary consultation. If you're just kind of like, what's my next step? What can I do with this? How can I trust God? And then what's really awesome is we have a whole network of folks that could possibly be in your area. They're all around the country for continued care. And so if you go to Boundless.org/counseling, or you can call our number at 1-800, the letter A and the word family, you can get one of those consultations set up. If you don't want to do that, we'll just give you Jenny Coffey's personal phone because she is a professional counselor.
It's not hard to find.
She doesn't even know what she's doing. She's super restless, you guys. We're not.
I've never been more restless than this moment.
No, so hopefully you will do that because we want to make sure that you are cared for and encouraged in the process. So thanks again, y'all.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you.